So you're thinking about purchasing a chameleon. I've got some information that I think will make your decision a little bit easier. My name's Pierce LaValle, this is Pierce's Planet, and let's jump right in. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about one of the most beautiful and most unique lizards on the planet, and that is chameleons. And in this video today, we're specifically going to be talking about panther chameleons because that's what I have. I'm sorry for the lighting in this video today. It's super overcasty here in Sacramento, and of course I choose the most overcast day to do a care guide on the most colorful animal. I would do that. To join me and help me out with this video, I brought along my girl Peach. She is a female panther chameleon. She's about 3 years old. Interesting story about Peach. When I first went to the reptile convention to get her, I bought her for extra money thinking that she was going to be a male because that's what the guy who sold her to me thought she was. And she ended up turned out to be a female. And the reason why I say that is because what makes panther chameleons so appealing for a lot of people is because the males are the ones that get these super bright colors. They get the bright red, green, yellow, orange, just beautiful lizards. And I'll probably put a picture of one right over here. And they are just extremely unique and extremely beautiful. These lizards come from Madagascar, and what's interesting about them is that when you go to different parts of Madagascar, the northern part, the southern part, the eastern part, western part, there's a different kind, almost a subspecies of panther chameleon that lives there. Some might be more blue, some might be, more rainbowish colored with the red, yellow, green. Some might be more orange, and it's just amazing how they've evolved over the years to even when they're on, the same island, because Madagascar is an island, in different parts of that island, the same species can be varied so differently. And I've always thought that was amazing about these lizards. Even though this is a guide on panther chameleons, I feel like this guide will be able to be a basic outline of pretty much every other chameleon species that you're gonna see in a pet store. Not 100% the same, but the basics, I believe, are pretty much the same. In my opinion, panther chameleons are some of the most unique lizards. I mean, chameleons in general are pretty much some of the most unique lizards on the planet. Everything about them is just odd. It's almost like from outer space. Their eyes can go 360 degrees, so they can look around their whole body, they can look behind them, and they work independently. So one eye could be looking one way, another eye could be looking another way, and that helps them when they're in the trees to look for predators and prey basically at the same time. They also have these like mitten-like hands that are perfect for gripping tree branches and life up in a tree. And to help out with that also is this prehensile tail that they have. They have this prehensile tail that they can grip onto things with. Let's see if I can get her to grip onto me. No. Well, they have this prehensile tail that they use to grip onto branches so that they have that extra support, so when they're climbing, they won't, if they lose their balance with their feet, they still have their tail that gives them that extra support so they can climb. You can see how they use it right there. How she's holding on to my fingers. One of the most unique adaptations of chameleons, and probably the most well-known, is their tongue. They have this super long tongue that can reach, twice the length of their body to go grab an insect. It's got stickiness on the end. I'll probably put in some feeding videos for you guys so you guys can see that tongue in action. Another famous thing about chameleons that probably everybody knows about is their color changes. Now, there is a misconception about their color changes. A lot of people think that their colors change based on their background for camouflage. And that is not completely true. Although they can do that in some situations, It's not completely true. You can't put a chameleon in front of a polka dot background and the chameleon's gonna turn polka dots. That doesn't work. That only works in Disney movies. What it's really, the main use for it is to reflect their mood and what mood they're in. When your chameleon is in a dark, in a dark color phase, usually means that it's kind of pissed off and it's gonna be a little bit moody. Males, when they brighten up their colors and they're showing all their colors, usually in the wild, is to attract a female. That's what scientists think that their colorations and the color changes are used for, is for mating purposes. Females, like Peach here, stay this peachy color, stay this dull color. This is why, part of the reason why I named her Peach. They stay this color. They don't change colors. They don't have these dramatic colors like the males do. And that's almost the same for almost every chameleon species. I'm not gonna speak for all chameleon species because I don't know all chameleon species, but the ones that I'm thinking of off the top of my head, like Vale chameleons, Jackson's chameleons, the females usually are less colorful and they don't change their colors as much as the males do. So when it comes to having a chameleon as a pet, most people will agree that they are not a beginner pet to own. They are a difficult species to work with. Some of the littlest mistakes can be deadly. There's not much wiggle room for mistakes when you're owning a chameleon. On top of that, most people will agree that chameleons, for the most part, are grumpy. Peach here is pretty nice. I've had her since she was a couple weeks old and I've worked with her and made sure she's gotten used to handling. But for the most part, I've heard that chameleons have a reputation of being grumpy. And that kind of goes into their handleability, and that's the first thing I wanted to talk about with their care, is can they be handled? So as far as handleability goes, they can be handled. They don't like to be handled, but they will tolerate it. And as you can see here, Peach is tolerating me handling her. She's just walking around exploring. So yes, they can get like this, but it takes some time and it's gonna take some patience. Naturally, they are scared of us, so they don't want to be handled. For the most part, they'll just crawl all over you like this and just kind of chill and just kind of explore. Handleability is something that I always want to bring up because a lot of people want to be able to hold their animals. And so I think you can hold a chameleon, but it's gonna be on their terms. When a chameleon doesn't want to be handled, you're gonna see those dark colors. It's gonna puff up at you. It might make a little, like, almost a hissing sound. And that's when you know your chameleon isn't in the mood to be handled. If your chameleon wants to be handled, like my girl Peach here, then they're gonna show you. When I come into the room and I open up the door to her cage, she walks straight up to me and walks straight onto my hand, and that's when I know, okay, she wants to be handled today. So probably the three main components of Panther chameleon care, and that is their light, their heat, and their humidity. These three things are essential if you want your Panther chameleon to thrive. Any little mess up of these three things could be deadly for your Panther chameleon, so it's very important that you get these things right. The first thing I want to talk about Panther chameleons is their humidity. And their humidity should be around 75 to 85%. That means you're gonna have to spray them a lot. You can give them a automatic mister, but if you don't have the funds for it, you're gonna have to manually spray them, and that could get a little tedious after a while. One time a day is not gonna cut it. You're gonna have to spray your Panther chameleon at least twice a day, if not more, depending on what area you're in. I spray Peach twice a day, and she's done well for me for 3 years. One thing that you could do as well is you could get a dripping system for your chameleon. And what a dripping system is a container that sits on top of the cage, and then it has a hose that goes into the cage and drips droplets of water for your chameleon to drink throughout the day. So if you only have time to spray your chameleon once a day, then I would recommend getting a dripping system so that they have that extra water throughout the day. Chameleons drink their water from the droplets on the leaves in their environment. They don't drink standing water. Even though they could drink standing water, for the most part, they're only gonna drink droplets on the leaves in the enclosure. So that is very important that you know that you need to spray your chameleon so that it will drink that water and get that hydration that it needs. As far as their heating goes, their basking spot is going to be anywhere between 80 to, at the highest, probably 90 degrees. And their ambient air temperature should be around 80 degrees. That's gonna be kind of difficult because they're in an arboreal enclosure, and so that's going to be hard to regulate their temperatures in an arboreal enclosure like that, but it's something that you need to do. They do need that heat. They live in a warmer area in Madagascar. Now, lighting. This might be one of the most underrated aspects of chameleon care. This is absolutely essential to them. You need the correct UVB lights for them to survive and for them to thrive. If you don't have that UVB on them, they will develop bone disease. They won't grow as well. They'll develop defects. It's just not something you want to deal with. They are very sensitive when it comes to the UV light, and they need that UV light to thrive. I'll try to put links to the UV lights and to some of the supplies for chameleons in my description, so go check that out if you're interested in purchasing a chameleon. As far as chameleon housing goes, you're gonna need a vertical enclosure. These are an arboreal species, which means they spend their life in the trees. They will rarely come down to the ground. I think I've only seen Peach on the ground maybe 4 or 5 times in her 3 years of life. It's going to have to be a screen enclosure. I know a lot of people think that glass is the best, especially, you know, when you're trying to keep humidity. Screen is like the worst thing that you could possibly use. And that's part of the reason why owning a chameleon is so difficult, because there's care requirements are so specific. But if you put a chameleon in a glass enclosure, it could work, but there's a high probability that they are going to get a respiratory illness. That's why you need to put them in a screen enclosure so they get that airflow, and that's why you're gonna have to spray them extra, because a screen enclosure like that isn't going to hold humidity as well as, say, a glass enclosure or a wooden enclosure. As far as, you know, cage requirements in terms of size, I have Peach here in a 2.5 by 1.5 by 1.5 screen enclosure. That's probably about the minimum you want to go. They do need a little bit more space. Males would need more space even for a minimum cage requirement. So that's just something to think about. The enclosures aren't that expensive because they are screen enclosures. Decorations for the enclosures. Chameleons are the perfect lizard to put in a bioactive setup if you can manage it. And I recommend putting them in a somewhat bioactive. You should at least have 1 live plant in there, in my opinion, but it's up to you about the amount of plants that you put in your chameleon's cage. The more vegetation, whether it's real or fake, the better for chameleons. Chameleons like living in an environment that looks lush, that looks like it has a lot of plants in it. Even mine, I feel like I have a lot of plants in there, but I feel like there could be more. That's what makes chameleon, you know, enclosures so beautiful with them in it as well, is seeing all the green that's in there, and then you see the Panther Chameleon in the back with all its colors, and it's just a really cool thing to look at. It's a really cool thing to see. After this segment, I'll probably take you guys on a little tour of her enclosure, just so you guys can see how I set up my Panther Chameleon's enclosure. Maybe give you guys some ideas for those of you who are confused or don't know how to start. I'll show you guys what my setup looks like, and you guys can kind of take some ideas from that. So another thing to consider when you're getting a Panther Chameleon is, what do they eat? And the answer is they pretty much eat any type of insect. They're insectivores. So they're gonna eat anything from crickets, mealworms, superworms, hornworms, dubia roaches, pretty much anything you will find at a pet store in terms of insects, they will eat. Some things are better than others. I personally feed Peach a staple of crickets, superworms, and dubia roaches. And then I'll give her other things as treats, like butterworms, hornworms, waxworms, things like that. I'll give her as treats, but not as her main food source. I've heard of some people who feed their chameleons like greens, like collard greens, and they'll mix them in with the insects and they'll eat them, and they'll take up some of the greens with them to give them the extra nutrients. I don't do that, but that is something that you can consider doing if you want to give your chameleon that extra nutrients. That's one of the most fun things about owning a chameleon, is watching them eat. To see that super long tongue shoot out of their mouth and grab an insect from across the cage is just something you only see on National Geographic, and it's in your home. Like, it's amazing. That is that's a reason in itself to get a chameleon. Another thing I wanted to talk about was cost. These are pretty expensive lizards. For a male, you're going to be spending an upwards of $300. Females will be a little cheaper, around $200, especially when you're buying them as a baby. As I learned the hard way, a lot of people, you can't really tell if it's going to be a male or female when it's a baby. So you might be spending $300 thinking it's going to be a male, and then it turns out to be a female, like the situation I had with Peach. One thing to consider if you're thinking about purchasing a chameleon is their lifespan. Panther chameleon specifically, females only live up to in upwards of 4 to 5 years. That's not very long, especially when you're going to be spending a couple $100s on this pet, just on the pet alone, not including its enclosure and things like that. So females only tend to live to be about 4 or 5 years old. Males, maybe 8 years old. Not very long lifespan. So that's just something that you're gonna wanna consider when you're purchasing a Panther chameleon. Peach here is 3 years old, and she's basically a grandma now. She's old. She's nearing the end of her life, unfortunately. Other chameleon species might have a little bit longer lifespans. I'm not sure specifically. I think Jackson's chameleons can live in the upwards of like 10 to 12-ish years. All in all, I think Panther chameleons are the most unique and hands down the most beautiful lizards in the animal kingdom. I don't think that you should get a Panther chameleon if you are a beginning reptile keeper. They have a lot of requirements, their care is difficult, and they could get sick or die very, very, very easily. Just remember all the work that you're going to have to put into this animal. You're gonna have to give it the right lighting. That is extremely important. You're going to have to spray it every day, multiple times a day, no exceptions. 1 time a day is not gonna cut it. You need to spray it at least 2 times a day. You have to feed it the right things. You're gonna have to give it the right heat. Just make sure you know what you're getting into before you purchase a reptile like this. Even for me, I've had troubles with chameleons in the past. Peach is my first Panther chameleon and my second chameleon overall. My first chameleon I got when I was about 10 years old, and it was a veiled chameleon. That chameleon only lived for about a month. I, as a kid, had done the research I thought I needed to do. My parents had done the research they needed to do. We took the people who sold him to us, we took their advice and cared for him the way they told us to, and it died. And it was because I was only spraying him every other day. I didn't give him the right type of lighting. And so this animal died quickly because I wasn't taking care of it properly. And that's the type of lizard that chameleons are. They are not the type of lizards that you have a lot of room for error for. But if you're a responsible reptile keeper, and if you know what you're doing, and if you've done your research, then yeah, I would say get a Panther chameleon. They are extremely cool pets. They're just the most unique looking lizards on the planet, and it doesn't really get much cooler than a chameleon, let alone a Panther chameleon. So that is all for today, you guys. What did you think about this video? Let me know in the comments. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, make sure you share this with some friends. Let's bring some people over here and let's get a conversation started. Until next time, everybody, my name is Pierce LaValle. This is Pierce's Planet, and remember, it's all about the reps, baby. Peace. Out getting a female for the price of a male like I did, and really, this is what we're doing. Ah, you're scratching my face. This is another thing to consider when you own a Panther chameleon, and that is that they always love to go to the highest point, which means your head could be a target for them to perch on. This is my life. I have a new hat. A Panther chameleon cap. Where are you? God damn it. Dude.